Welcome back to Salesforce Mojo. I'm really excited about the content we have today. We are going to be going over a headless commerce checkout example, and more specifically, we're going to be going through how to actually move a product into a cart and through checkout using the Salesforce B2B and B2C APIs that are available. So if you're interested in an in-depth example and walkthrough of the life cycle of a cart to order, including going through Postman and actually using that and talking a little bit about authentication and seeing this all come to life, keep on watching because we're going to be going through that in a moment. So before we get too far in the weeds of actually doing this, we're here trying to go from cart to order with the APIs that Salesforce provides with B2B commerce. And you guys probably are familiar with what Headless is at this point. But just for maybe those who aren't familiar, Headless is being able to decouple the front end experience with the back end experience of a commerce application. So with B2B commerce that we've been going through, you've noticed that we've gone through all the back end functionality, but also the front end capabilities inside of Experience Cloud. Well, you might want to decouple the front end and not use Experience Cloud and maybe use React or Vue or another framework hosted somewhere else. And so you need the capability to move your items, put them in a cart, and move that cart all the way through checkout and get it into an order. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Is we're going to go through that life cycle of how to go from item to cart to checkout to order. But I wanted to make sure that everyone understood why you would actually do something like this. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with a product. And we're going to take that product and we're going to put it in a cart. And then we're going to take that cart and we're actually going to update it to a checkout status, which makes it a special thing. And then we're going to go through payment and all of that. And then we're actually going to go over and move it into a finalized order. But before we get too far, if you have not followed my videos before, you might want to go back to some of the previous ones and make sure your requirements are checked here. You need to have a completed store. You need to have products and pricing set up, search index completed. You need to have a payment integration set up as well. You have to have a user in order to do this because you have to authenticate as someone. And you need to make sure that they actually have the right entitlements and access throughout the store. So your profiles need to be ready. And finally, you probably want to be a little familiar with Postman, although I'll show some of the basics in here. And then you'll get some of the assets as part of watching this video here. All right, so now let's jump right into it. So I'm on the Connect REST API developer guide that Salesforce has. I'm in a section called B2B and B2B2C commerce resource. So you've heard me say B2B2C a couple of times and D2C. I might use those interchangeably. They're basically the same things at this point, but basically commerce on core with the LWR templates here. So this resource right here is all of the REST capabilities that we have in endpoints. And there's a lot in here. We have a lot with carts, as you can see. There's a lot with checkout, understand the context and orders, and just a ton more. So you can go through here and really just, go at it as far and as much as you actually want to do with this. But the first time I went through this, I found it a little challenging to follow. What are the right steps and things I need to actually make this successful? So that's what we're going to be covering today. And I thought it would be helpful if we started with going back to Lucidchart. I know I've done this a couple of times in the past here and just go through kind of a life cycle of a cart. So one of the first things you're actually going to do is create a cart. And at this point, it's going to be an empty cart, but that cart is going to be a record in Salesforce, and it's going to be owned by a user or a person, the person that you're authenticated with. And once you've done that, you will go and you'll create cart items, and that will actually fill your cart up. So order, 5 front doors or 3 windows or, 2 this, 2 that. You actually fill the cart up. And once you're done with the cart, you then move into checkout. Now, checkout is 2 different things. It's actually a state for the cart, but it's also, a session that you have. So as you begin to interact with these APIs, you might get a cart into a checkout state and you might come to it after a while and it says the session is expired, which will require you to delete that cart checkout session and restart it. So we'll show you kind of what a couple of those look like here. But once you've gotten all your items in the cart, the first thing you'll do is you will start the checkout session. And once you've started checkout, one of the things that is pretty nuanced, and quite frankly, I don't have all the details on this either because this is really new, and I think a lot of people are still trying to figure this out. But it does mention in the documentation that you do need to check this checkout status, and this ensures that all the integrations have successfully run. This link here, and I were to scroll down to this section right here, it says to ensure the asynchronous checkout process, such as calculating shipping taxes, promotions, finish, you must make a GET request to this endpoint. And so that's why I have this state right here. So you're starting checkout, you're checking it to make sure all those integrations have successfully run. And then once you've done that, you need to pay for it. And in this example today, we're going to be dealing just with credit card. So you do need the default Salesforce Stripe integration configured, which we're not going to go through, but it is in their documentation available on the free GitHub. So the first thing we'll do is we will tokenize the credit card payment, which basically gives us an ID to use. And once we tokenize that credit card payment, we'll then go and authorize the payment to make sure there's actually funds available for us to complete the checkout. And once we have that completed, we will go and we'll actually place the order. And that will complete the kind of experience here. There are a couple other things that we can and will do throughout the process, such as updating the checkout delivery address and shipping instructions. I'll show that in a moment as well. Some of that is optional, like shipping instructions. Some of it is required, such as delivery address. All right, so let's actually get into the fun now. So where I wanted to start was actually in Salesforce, in our Salesforce Mojo instance here. And you can see that we have carts. One of them right now is in a checkout state. There's two that are closed right here. And we're basically starting with no open ones for this account, Shane Smythe, which in this case, I'm using a B2C LWR template, but we could do the same thing with the B2B LWR one that we've reviewed as well. But that's why you see kind of the name as my name there, because it's a person account, it's in a B2C instance. Like I said, it will work for both. So we're starting with nothing. So let's go to Postman, and we're actually going to do all of this from Postman because the idea here is to show the full life cycle of the APIs. You'd obviously be doing this in development language like Node.js with your React front end, or whatever your language of choice is. But the concept is making sure that the APIs work for your situation here. So we're in Postman now, and you can see on the left-hand side, I have a couple of different collections. I created this Headless Commerce API collection to really help me structure the different areas of this Headless Commerce API. So you can see I have the Commerce Cart section over here, and then I have Commerce Products, so I could pull information on products, and then I have the Commerce Checkout down here. And what I've done is kind of labeled them 1 through whatever the steps are, so that for me it's easier to kind of go boom, 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 boom all the way through cart to checkout, and I can complete that life cycle pretty quickly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to here, and I'll just orientate us on what we're seeing. Right now you can see that we have a get endpoint here, and we have a couple of variables. Endpoint right here in our instance is the Salesforce Mojo URL. So that's the mysalesforce.com version of this. It's not the site version of it. And then you can see that we have an API version, which you really could do anywhere between 50 and 57, I think, is the supported window. But I've just been using 54 since it's been in here a little bit. And then you have your web store ID, which is crucial, especially if you're switching between instances and stores. But it's basically just a Salesforce ID of that. And what this first route does is it's supposed to actually get us the web store if it exists. So let's go and click send right here. And you can see that it's giving us an invalid web store or no active carts. So that basically tells me that I don't have an active cart, which follows true with what we actually saw in Salesforce. But actually, as I'm thinking about it, I should pause for a second and I should go back to authentication for a moment. In the header section, you will need authorization and a bearer token and an access token. There are a couple different ways to do this. For me, the easiest way was to do a SOAP request for the login community, because this cannot be a connected app route. It has to be a login with the actual community user, because the context has to be through that community user. So I have this SOAP request down here that has a SOAP body where I'm passing the org ID, and I'm passing the username and password of this user, and it's giving me the information I need. I believe you can do this with OAuth as well. You can see that I have one down here. I've always, at least in this instance, I've had some issues with getting that working, so I found it just to be easier to deal with a SOAP request here. So once you have that, then you'd be able to come in here and start requesting that. I have my instance set up where when the session or the access ID is given from that request, it actually populates it into a access token environment variable, and I'm able to use that throughout all of my requests. So that's why you'll see me kind of just going and hitting these and not copying and pasting as much as possible. So back to this, you can see that the web store ID or there's no active cart exists message is given to us. So that goes to our first one right here, which is I need to create a cart. So I will click send on this, and it should generate us a cart here. So it looks like it worked successfully. If I hop over into Salesforce again and click refresh, I should see a new cart in the active state, and I do see that. Now, just to give us a little bit of orientation on actually what we're looking here, let's go back to our Lucid chart. We are on this step right here. And if we open up this URL, we'll go to the documentation, and we can see that it has a route for us. You can see that this is kind of italicized here. This is actually your web store ID, not web store in here twice. So you'll want that, and then we're making a post request, and we need to pass in the name and type. And those are two of the optional parameters down here that we have. So that's what I've done. And then our next step here is we need to fill the cart with stuff. So in this case, we're going to fill it up with one of our products we've created previously, which is the front door. So that's where step number 2 comes in. And I'll give you a little bit of a hint right here. I've created a quick little test script right here that will basically take the cart ID from down here, the response, and it populates an environment variable in the cart ID so that I don't have to go and copy and paste a bunch of different places. So number 2 here is, now that I have all this information and I want to actually fill up the cart, I'm going to pass in a product ID and the quantity and the type. And you can see here that there's nowhere I'm actually specifying the cart. Well, that's because a couple of these APIs have some handy parameters. You can see right here it says active. So if I were to go back over into the documentation here, let's just pop in there real quick. You can see that I have a couple of options when I'm dealing with this. I can either put in the cart ID specifically, or I can say active or current. And in this case, I put active because, again, it's the easiest to do. I could, because I have that environment variable, put in the cart ID, but I feel like the active one is a little bit more scalable. So now that I have that, I'm going to click send on this route here. And what this should do is give me a response of my cart ID, the cart item, and what I actually put in there for what SKU and how much. So you can see down below, I put in that front door and I've put a quantity of 4, and it tells me how much each price was, and all the details you typically would have with this information. So let's hop back over to Salesforce for a quick moment and see if that actually rings true. It looks like we did get a quantity updated here, or a dollar amount update, I should say. And if we hop into this record, you can see that there's items and there's 4 of here. So far so good. We have all that information updated successfully. The next state here, if we go back to our Lucid chart, is to actually start the checkout process. So let's hop back over into Postman and do that real quick. All right, we're back over here in Postman, and now I'm going to go down from my commerce cart section to my commerce checkout session, or section, I should say. And you can see that the first thing I need to do, number 1 here, is I need to start checkout. And you can see that I do need to pass in the cart ID that I'm dealing with. So that's where this variable comes in handy as I'm using to start this checkout here. So I'll go ahead and click send, and you can see that that has successfully started. And if I again hop back over to Salesforce here and go to my cart, I should see, once I refresh it, that it has gone from active to checkout. And if I scroll down, I do see that the status is now checkout, which is good. So we're making progress. Once we've started this, the next thing we need to do is check the status for the integrations, as I mentioned before. So let's hop back over to Postman here. Step number 2 is let's take the current checkout, the active checkout right here, and let's just see where it's at. And so you can see we have minimal information on this. We have the ID, we have a delivery group, and we have the ID of it. That's basically it. But once we do that, the next thing we should do here, and this is actually one step I don't have on the Lucid chart because some of it's optional and some of it's not, but we do need the delivery address. But we need like desired delivery date or shipping information. Those are optional, but we will keep them on here for now. So I need to update the delivery address. So I'll click send here with this payload, and you can see that the response is basically the last get of the cart or the checkout, and you can see that we have the delivery group, but now it has a delivery address and some information filled in. So if we go back to Salesforce for a moment and see if that rings true, we'll click refresh here and go to our delivery group, and we should see some information filled in here. And we do see all that information filled in, which is perfect. So now we've made progress. We have all that information updated on this actual checkout here. And now if we move back to our Lucid charts, we've gone through all the kind of the required steps, and now we're ready to complete. I want to pay and I want to be done with this. So we're going to go back to Postman, and we're going to stop here for a moment because this is where it gets a little nuanced. This is the payment tokenize API request. So let's go over to the API documentation here. And you can see that we're tokenizing a payment for a commerce store checkout. So in this case, we're passing in a credit card, the name, and some expiration date. And you can see this information right here. If I click into this input, this is actually what's required. We need to pass in one of these three, and one of these three options is required. Now, we might at some point in the future do another video on what if I don't want to use credit card? What if I want to use an alternative payment? It's definitely possible, but this is specifically created for the credit card one, or this API call is. So we're going to be doing the tokenized credit card. So we'll take this fake credit card and name and all the information, and we're going to say, okay, now we want to tokenize it. And what this will do is it will give us a token ID. And this token ID is required for the next step here. And I've done the same kind of tricky little thing here, or nice little test script is basically take this, put it into a token variable. So if I go to my next step here, I can see that I have a payment token, and we're basically using that payment token as now we want to pay. So the last step was basically getting ready to pay. It's creating a secure method for us to use that token in all of the steps afterwards. And so we're taking that token and we're now authorizing the credit card based on that token. And we're also at the same time passing in the billing address because that's required in order for us to complete the order. So let's go ahead and click send here. And we see that we have success now, which is great. And once we've done that, we're ready to go. So let's just go back to our cart here for a second. And we'll just kind of peruse around here. We can see that we have a delivery method added as an item now, and we have all the information in the right state. If I complete this and it is successful, we should see this cart go away, and we should see an order come into play. So we'll go ahead and click send here, and it should give us an order. Okay, and so we have a GSCXU order. And so we'll go ahead and click refresh here, and we can see that is now closed, which is what we expect. And we'll hop over into order summary, and we do see a new order with the GSCX that we just saw in Postman. And if we come in here, we can see a lot of great information. We see how many we ordered, we see the delivery method, we see the shipping address, and we see our order payment summary attached as well. And now this order is ready to process and move forward. So hopefully that was helpful for everyone to kind of see a full life cycle of a cart to checkout to order. I know for me, the first time going through it, it was a little complicated to make sure I had all the pieces in the right place and kind of understand how I do authentication and what do the payloads look like and all of that. But I'd really encourage you to take a moment, look at this, go to the documentation if you're confused about any of the parameters there. Feel free to comment on the video if you have any questions about how I set this up. Thanks for watching. Click like, subscribe to the channel if you like our content. I try to put these videos out about once a week. And thanks for watching.